Today, we talk about the world of wedding photojournalism on Behind the Shot. Hi, once again, welcome to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill, and this is the show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots, from conception to completion, and all the stories and challenges that happen in between, trying to better understand why a photographer made the choices that they made. Before we get into today's show, a reminder for you, if you are listening to the audio version of the show, we always have the show notes and the image that we're talking about up at behindtheshot.tv, so you can check it out there. You can also subscribe to the show at the website behindtheshot.tv, and you can subscribe either to an audio-only feed or a video feed, depending on what your podcast app of choice supports. Also, the video, it's up on YouTube for you too. Got a couple of quick announcements before I bring the guest in today. First of all, I want to remind you that we do have the new Flern discount code that Aaron Nace of Flern was so kind to give us. If you head over to Flern and you sign up for a subscription, you can save 20% with the discount code that you see on screen. It's Behind the Shot 20. No spaces, just Behind the Shot, all one word, and 20, the number 20, and that'll get you through everything that you need to sign up for there. And here's the big announcement. Those of you that follow me on social media or follow Don Komarechka on social media know that we've been talking about doing some joint stuff together, and we're going to start doing some critique shows. So we've created a Flickr group called Behind the Shot. If you go over to the to Flickr and you search for Behind the Shot, you'll find the group. If you find me too, you'll find the group that I'm a member of. If you join the Behind the Shot group, you can right now, at the time this show airs, submit your shots for the first critique show that I'm going to do with Don Komarechka. And all you have to do is tag your photo with BTS Critique, all one word. So tag it BTS Critique. That way we can search and find it. And then Don and I will do, probably mid-November will be our first show. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're just going to be talking about your shots and how we think you might be able to improve your skill in your craft. And that brings us up to today. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit nervous and I'm a little bit excited about today. And if you follow me on social media, you know why. The gentleman that I have on today is literally one of the best wedding photographers on the planet. I want to welcome Denis Reggie to the show. Denis, how are you?
What a kind introduction. Doing great, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on your program. I've admired your whole series, and Skip Cohen turned me on to what you were up to. Yeah, he's great. And wow, you've done some amazing things, sir. You stay very busy.
Thank you.
Aside from your amazing photography of musical performances and live entertainment, wow, you have a busy life.
Thank you very much. Coming from you, that means a lot. You're one of a rare breed. I want to touch on this first because I've had a number of Canon Explorers of Light on the show. You've been a Canon Explorer of Light like since the beginning of the program, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I'm always fascinated by Canon Explorers of Light because it's not just that you are, an ambassador for Canon, right? You're not a representative of Canon. Canon approached this whole type of concept in a unique way in that they went out and they found photographers that they think speak to photography as a whole in all different genres. And you're one of them. Tell me, or for those that don't know, tell me a little bit about Canon Explorers of Light.
There are probably 4 dozen of us that Canon has identified who they think are leaders and doing image making and spreading a message that's positive and good for the industry. In the wedding area, which is obviously the area that I'm involved in, there are a wonderful handful of us. Joe Busink comes to mind, and Clay Blackmore, and Bob Davis, and others. But it's a terrific group. Young, it's men, it's women. But Canon came up with this idea in the mid '90s, and I was honored to be the first wedding person that they asked to be a part of it. And it's been great. If it's not speaking at a convention or doing an interview or writing an article about this, that, and the other, and it doesn't even have to be Canon specific. In fact, Steve, the photo we're speaking about today is not a Canon image. It's one that I did as we're going to learn, on a Hasselblad camera, another very fine.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions. And now that I know that, actually, that's going to change some things I ask about later and that brings Skip Cohen actually kind of back into it too. Because Skip was the president of Hasselblad for a long time.
Yes, he was.
I've had Rick Salmon on a bunch of times and a bunch of other Canon Explorers of Light. I just think it's an interesting program because it shows that the one thing that I think Canon just really nails is giving back to the photo community. They fly Canon Explorers of Light around to do presentations at photo exhibitions and shows, or photo groups.
Photography schools as well.
Photography school, yeah. Just such a cool program. I mentioned in the intro that you are known as one of the best wedding photographers in the world, but really it gets even more interesting than that, because American Photo rated the top 10 wedding photographers on the planet, right? They made you number one. And we all know you're good, right? And there's a lot of great photographers and you have an amazing talent, and that's great. But even when you're at the top of your game, that's got to be something that makes you want to phone home.
Well, it's an honor. And of course, those are very kind words coming from that wonderful publication and those editors and such. But, I'm just out there trying to do what I think is right. And I'm honored that folks within the business respect, what I'm up to. It's been a lonely place in the sense that stylistically, I was going against the waves of the ocean. I basically, as a photojournalist, as a wedding photojournalist, sort of deviate from the normal hold still, look here, and smile, the photography with use of mouth and direction and prompting and suggestion, bringing of props, posing of Jimmy Choo shoes and rings and all of that. I'm just in a different space. The choreographed wedding photography is the exact opposite of what I do. So for Canon to embrace it, for American Photo to embrace it and say, you know what? You're out there. There aren't many folks who approach wedding photographer as a follower of the action and not a leader. A distinct difference. Right. I'm there to anticipate and document. I'm not there to orchestrate or suggest. It is not, in my opinion, a fashion shoot. So it honestly attracts a different client and a different level of respect of photography, because some people judge photography by precision, perfection to a commercial standard. Can we put a meter on it and see whether it's exactly right?
Right.
Or is it more of an art form where it's really more about the moment than the necessarily technical proficiency? That said, I do typically like photographs that are in focus and properly exposed and well lit. But honestly, those are all secondary to the moment, capturing the essence of something that can be preserved forever, the feelings between two people, or the tear from a father's eye seeing his daughter in the gown for the first time. There's so many moments like that. That's what's king or queen, not the technical perfection. I'd love to have both, but if I had to prioritize one, it's always going to be the moment.
You made a couple of interesting points in there, and that is, yes, what you do is at times 180 degrees opposite of what we think of as wedding photography, and yet you've still been embraced by those magazines and those entities that's cheer and support wedding photography. But also, one of the things I love about your approach to your photography is it is still wedding photography, but it's so much more environmental. Even your detail shots, like you have a shot I love on your website of its legs and a dog, or two small kids. They're almost detail shots in some ways, and yet they're environmental. And what happened just now as you were talking was you made the comment of a father crying, and I could almost picture how you would shoot it, because of the way you capture things. And I actually DJ'd weddings for 18 years, so I'm well familiar with that world, just not as a photographer. You have been featured because of your work and the type of clientele that you have. And your clientele, we're talking James Taylor and Mariah Carey and Tory Burch, and you are most famous as being known as the Kennedy family wedding photographer, which is going to lead us into today in a minute. But I do want to mention, you've been on Oprah, you've been focused on VH1, CNN, I could go on, Entertainment Tonight, the BBC, all the way over to China television. You've been on the covers of Life, People, and a lot of other ones. And I'm kind of curious to you. In fact, you've got photos, correct me if I'm wrong on this, you do have photos in the Smithsonian Museum of American History, right?
Correct.
And the National Portrait Gallery, too.
Both, yeah. I'm honored to, if they ask, of course I sent. It took me a while to prepare them, but yes, absolutely. I accepted their a request with honor, and supplied them with a few of my images, which I'm thrilled to have in their permanent collection. Absolutely.
So, I mean, the resume so stands on its own that it's just amazing. But there's something I didn't know about you until I was researching to have this chat. And when this popped up in front of me, it lit my eyes up, because I'm a fan of handling copyright properly. So I'm sure you know Jack and Ed. Yes. Ed Greenberg and Jack Reznicki. So I've had them on 2 different shows.
They're great.
And I actually did a walkthrough since the 2018 update on the registration process. I did a full walkthrough of my registration process with some advice, actually, even from Jack after I made it. He gave me a couple of things he thought should be added. You've actually twice addressed Congress on copyright reform. I don't want to make this a copyright show, but I am curious. As a photographer that shoots at the level that you shoot at, what do you see as the status right now of copyright for photographers?
About to change for the good. There are 2 bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, that, in fact, as late as today, I received emails from PPA, the Professional Photographers of America, who have been terrific in this process as well, talking about, this is the time to write your senator and write your congressman or congresswoman and let them know how we feel about this enhancement, which allows a small claims court type process for infringers of a copyright. Copyrights are under a federal law, but
Correct.
There are no federal small claims court. Those are for cities and maybe states or your county or whatever. But when it's the federal law, right now, it's very expensive to proceed against someone who has borrowed your photograph for some commercial purpose, put it on some book cover or some usage for profit. Well, I think the photographer, the creative artist, obviously needs to be compensated for that. There needs to be a respect for the copyright. This law, and I should mention, supported by both sides of the aisle. It's neither a Democratic nor a Republican sort of thing. It's not that way. It's just, I think, good business to allow us visual artists to have an added resource for adjudicating, for resolving issues about potential infringement. Yes, it impacts me, but it impacts many, many other photographers, mom and pop studios, portrait places, folks where, especially with online and the ability of Instagram and other social media avenues to allow the use of, the copying of, the unauthorized use of images. And, if it's for some situations, you may just allow personal use, a young person trying to talk about fun weddings or idols in their mind. That's one thing. But a commercial entity that has advertisement and for-profit usage where your photograph is used as bait to bring in some bigger fish and a cha-ching, a revenue for them, I think it's only fair that the visual artist is compensated for the use of their photograph as being that bait, as, this is how we earn our living. And I think that the Congress now understands that. And if this law goes forward, it's just one mechanism that allows us a far less expensive way to deal with infringers by having something sponsored by the Copyright Office, have persons listen to it and say, here's what's fair, pay that and be done with it, as opposed to a federal case.
When PPA started pushing for the small claims idea, people were saying, well, that's just ridiculous. You can't do federal law in a small claims court. Right. What they didn't understand is kind of where we are now, and that is a division of the U.S. Copyright Office will be set aside to act as similar to a small claims court, and then
almost mediator type people who are experienced in that area, right?
And I see so many people say, "Well, just don't use social media and put your images online." The problem is, from a marketing point of view, that's where we are today. If you are that small mom pop wedding photographer or family photographer, you need to market yourself with your work, and you need to feel safe that you're protected. I do want to go into the photojournalism thing before we bring up the shot, because you are known as the pioneer, pretty much the creator, really, of wedding photojournalism. You have a photojournalistic background, but what made you make the connection, right? So you start shooting weddings, you have a photojournalism background. Okay, that sounds logical, but still most people that shot for newspapers or whatever.
Yeah.
Go pose wedding groups.
Yeah.
You connected the two. What was the
Right.
switch for that?
A couple of people were very influential toward me when I was 16 and 17 years old. One of them was my small town newspaper editor with his cigar in his mouth. And he would just tell me, you go to that event with your camera and you don't make the news, you report the news. You don't use your mouth. You use your heart and your mind and mostly your camera to find a great moment. So it was all about anticipation, telling a story, but not to make the news. And that's what he told me. My uncle, Sammy Reggie, the same way. When I photographed his daughter's wedding, gosh, this is 40 plus years ago, he just said, I just like those photos that are just when you aren't even aware of the camera. Obviously, I was very taken by that notion. I had never done a wedding before, and that was my first for my first cousin. But my uncle told me the importance of moments discovered, which resonated, almost reverberated what I had been told by Sam Saunier of the Crowley Post-Signal in my hometown of Crowley, Louisiana, so many years ago when I was doing a little after high school job and then weekends and Friday night football games. That's where I learned to be a photojournalist. But with strong impact from this very savvy journalist editor who sort of told me the ropes about telling a story, authenticity, and that you didn't want to make the news the way you wanted it to be. And all of that resonated when I started going to weddings. And I saw, wow, weddings are completely fiction. The photographer is making them do things that doesn't exist. It doesn't tell the story.
And often they don't actually even want to do.
Yeah, yeah. And then as an added bonus, I also learned over the years that when people are not aware of the photographer or the camera, they actually look so much better. And the antithesis of that today, the selfie, where you see all these young women and men and such, contorting their faces to look interesting and arty and fun. It looks nothing like them because they're so aware of the camera. It's all about the camera. And what you end up with is an odd image, almost a humorous image. But there's so many deeper moments at a wedding where you don't want that edge.
Right.
You really want what's in the heart. You want a tear. You want an expression, the authentic emotion. And I think that is best found. And I think my editor, God rest his soul, from way, way back, would probably agree that it needs to be discovered, captured, and documented, not orchestrated.
Okay. So I used to make a comment in the years that I DJ'd weddings. There was, and it's one photographer that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, and that is there were always people taking candids, but they were taking candids going around snapping. But not this one individual. He would crouch next to a dance floor. He would sit next to a bush and look through he had top viewfinder, like an old Hasselblad type thing.
Yeah.
And he would just sit there and I'd watch him, and he'd sit there for 10 minutes looking through that viewfinder. Right. And I wasn't a photographer at the time. And I immediately went, he's waiting for the picture to frame itself.
Correct.
And
good for him.
I mean, just brilliant. Do you pose anything? I mean, do you do formal wedding party shots?
Of course, that's going to be the 3% of my coverage. The 97 is what I'm known for. But honestly, Steve, if I left an assignment, large or small, famous people or not famous people, without doing the 3%, I'd likely be in trouble. Because it's a part of history, a family, a wedding party, the bride and her bridesmaids are family. It's of course the official shot of the bride, the couple. They're the big 5 pictures that we need that are formal and posed. But can we do those in 15 minutes? Wouldn't that be nice? Instead of what we used to spend an hour and a half, or hand them some balloons and have them walk on the hilltop and all those terrible things. But those phony fashion-esque images. But no, I think that it's definitely a part of it, and we show those on my website as well because I want people to know. Listen, I'm known for photojournalism and finding moments. That's my thing, and we love that. That's the mainstay. But it doesn't mean we don't walk away from those important groupings for historical purposes.
And really, that separates the event. You have family portraiture and event which is really what a wedding is in so many ways. Let's get into today's shot. And before I bring it up, I want to, for those of you that have not seen this shot or don't know the shot, because I've tried to be really secretive on social media about what we were going to talk about. The Wall Street Journal called this image, the one we're going to do today, and I'm quoting here, the watershed image that transformed wedding photography forever. It's also been said the most famous wedding photograph in history. This is the shot. This is John Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette, their wedding. I think it was 1996.
Correct. September 21st. Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember this event in history, and the entire country probably from that day knew when this event happened. For those of you that are listening on the audio feed, I'm going to try and do something that I always do. I should probably have you do it, but I'm going to try. I try and describe the picture for those of you that are on an audio feed that have not seen it yet. And I don't know how to describe something that literally, as I just mentioned, has been called a transformative shot for an entire industry. But here we go. This is John Kennedy Jr. and his bride, Carolyn Bessette. They're leaving and we'll find out these details in a minute, but what looks like a small chapel, and there actually is a sign that says First AB Church on it. And it says founded in 1893. So when I say they're leaving what appears to your eye to be an old, small, very small, weathered building and chapel, we know that it is, and it was founded in 1893. As they're leaving, there's people behind them as though they just walked out of the ceremony. There's vines crawling up the wooden steps. John is kissing her hand, and she's got this I'm a hopeless romantic, right?
Me too.
And you'll know what I mean by this. She's got this just amazing look as she looks at his face. And it's just, and it's got a slight Dutch angle to it as well. So, all right, let's dive into this. This was Hasselblad, you said earlier.
Yeah, let me say well spoken, by the way. Thank you for your beautiful description of it.
Did I do all right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, listen, it was such a magical moment. And I'm with you on this. It's her expression that really, I mean, John is being that prince of a gentleman.
He's
reaching
being
for the
what
hand.
you picture
Yeah.
as JFK's kid.
Yeah. Just a gentleman honoring this great woman he's going to spend the rest of his life with. All of that. It had the right feeling. But her expression of being caught off guard, surprised yet elated, joyous, loving. Her face, her expression, I think, really cinches the photograph in terms of the magic between the two of them. His, the gesture of a prince, hers, the reaction of someone just entranced by his romantic gesture to reach for her hand and bring it to his lips. Wow. There's just one of those moments.
That's it. Everything in this picture is what's the word I'm looking for? It's Prince-like, right? Everything in this, and for those that say it, no, I'm not talking about the musical artist, okay? This is Romeo and Juliet happening in front of your eyes. There's a good way to word it. And the way that it's lit, which we'll get into, the dodging, burning, lighting, whatever it is, she actually, partially because of her hair color, her dress color, her face is lit more as you would do. She seems to be the main subject. This was a Hasselblad.
Yes.
Do you know what lens you used for this?
Oh, I know very well. It was the 60 millimeter 3.5 Distagon, one that I chose very purposefully because let me say that this wedding sort of evolved, the assignment evolved because this was supposed to be a daytime wedding. But for reasons of, I've heard a couple of explanations, but fear of helicopters discovering them because it was a secret wedding because they were trying to avoid paparazzi blitz, understandably.
Right.
The wedding, which was supposed to be, I think it was like 4:30 or something, which would have been daytime, ended up being later, like almost 7 o'clock, nighttime. And then there was a light rain. And then you're in a place with, there's no electricity. There are no streets. This is Cumberland Island off the coast of Georgia in a, as best I can say it, a jungle setting.
Which would explain the vines.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the vines actually look dead even. It really looks like a dilapidated old classic church.
That is exactly what it was. And I think what it is, they've sort of kept it, at that same level of quaintness. I should mention, even the floorboards in the little tiny church, which must have been, I don't know, 20 feet by 15 feet. It wasn't very big. Even the floorboards were parting so that vines were growing through the floorboards.
Inside?
No air conditioning, no electricity. Inside. Yeah, inside as well. So it was rickety, to say the least, but it was that rusticness that gave it authenticity and a connection with nature. They used no perfectly arranged flowers. Everything was chosen from the island in a very simple fashion. There was no grandeur. The greatness of the wedding was in its simplicity. The elegance of the wedding was not in the expensiveness of it. It was in the simplicity, just the connection to nature and the way things were. And yes, it was a slave's church. It was used by the slaves in that time period working on plantations, an African Baptist church from the 19th century, rebuilt, I think, in the 30s. So this place was probably 65 years old. And the paint, I'm sure, not much newer than that, right? And again, from a photography point of view, there was also the challenge of taking a camera that in 1996 didn't focus itself, right? There was no little red beam. There were no AF autofocus lenses. So this had to be done manually. And exposures had no way, the algorithm couldn't hone in on the face. It didn't know where the face was.
Yeah, there's
was
no spot metering and yeah.
There's none of that. Yeah, this is a Metz 60 CT4 flash, a big potato masher on a bracket that I had designed to hold it above the camera, 60 millimeter lens.
It's like a wedding photographer's flash bracket to elevate it off where a hot shoe would be and off of lens angle, but it is attached to the camera.
It is attached to the camera on a bracket to raise it. Oh, I don't know, maybe 15 inches or so above the lens, 16 inches. Remember, the flash itself is probably 12 inches tall. So you're just giving it that 6, 7, 8 inch push upwards so that the light emanates from a position that gives a more favorable shadow under the chin. You don't want the light too close to the lens because then you don't have a defining shadow between the jaw and the neck. Visually, you want that shadow, which is really beautiful when the flash is just slightly elevated, so that the light emanates, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 inches above the lens.
But it's manual power on the flash too?
It could be, but I did not use it that way. I always used it because things happen so quickly. I'm actually using the OTF, excuse me, off the film. It's TTL, that's through the lens, but it's OTF, it's off the film plane. So Hasselblad put a sensor that read the reflectivity of light, OTF, off the film.
Wow.
So there's a sensor in the Hasselblad 503, CXI, maybe CW, I can't remember which one, but it was in the 503 series, a manual crank Hasselblad with that nice little gizmo inside, that sensor to read the flash, and then a series of connective adapters, the Metz adapters that they designed to interface with the flash. Basically, the flash's output was a function of the reading of the light hitting the film plane. And the only way you could adjust the exposure, or compensate, I should say, is by dialing in an ISO, either the true ISO of the film. This was Kodak's PMC, a 400 speed, medium to low contrast color negative film, professional grade, a very wonderful and beautiful film, Kodak PMC. It was advertised at 400. Most of us shot it at either, I would say, 320. Some people would even give it another third of a stop, bring it down to 250, so that you would, in essence, overexpose it based on what they advertised it as being. Now, as I was looking at this scene for John Kennedy and Carolyn Bessette, I knew they were coming out of the chapel. I put the 60 on because there was no way I could focus an 80 because it was so dark that an 80 is just too critical of a focus. Whereas with a 60, especially if I stopped it down to f8, even f11 or somewhere in between, I knew that I had a superb chance of getting it crisp in focus. Even if I didn't bring it to my eye in focus, I'd have a superb chance. And because there was no light, I actually, in the darkness, racked the lens all the way to infinity And I thought, well, it's not going to be infinity. And then I just backed it away based on experience to what I thought would be about 8 feet. I guessed. I had no other way of doing it because it was in 100% darkness. I could not see the hand in front of me when I shot the photo. I only saw them because I saw them in silhouette from the only light in the scene, which were the candles on the back wall of the chapel. So I saw them come out of the church in silhouette. There is absolutely no frontal lighting. There are no street lights. There are no streets. There are only paths in a jungle. There's no housing. There's no automobiles. There's nothing. So this also not only the most famous photo likely of my career so far, but also the most difficult, I would say, without question, because technically...
Hold on.
Yeah. It was done under the toughest of circumstances with no assistant, right? They're just 35 people plus me, their hired photographer to document it. No one to even assist me. So I'm there focusing a camera that can't be focused at night.
And planning on a daylight shoot.
I came there fully equipped for a daylight shoot. It ended up 2.5 hours later, so it became a nighttime shoot. It started raining, as well. And then, as we know, the face of that church is white. And do you know what reflective metering does when it sees white?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, it shuts down, so you're going to be underexposed by at least a stop. So then again, I had to look at it and say, okay, I know when I step out at 8 feet, my 60 millimeter lens is going to be seeing all of that white. So I downgraded the ISO to 125 so that the system would work harder to compensate for the whiteness of that exterior. Because if I didn't do that, it'd be trying to make it 18% gray. And in doing that, the only way you make white gray is by giving it less light, and the less light would have underexposed the actual subject of the image. So the way you did it in those days, believe it or not, is that you fibbed to the Hasselblad dial and you said that the film was not 400 or 320, but the film was 125 to make the flash system work that much harder to not be fooled, if that's the right word, by the whiteness of the subject. Otherwise, the negative would have been grossly underexposed. Now, that's 20 years of thinking, because I was 20 years into my profession.
This happens to everybody today. This is what happens if you go out and shoot snow. I mean, it's the same scenario, and that is it sees a mountain of snow. It wants to make it 18% gray. But okay, I don't even know where to go, man. It's pitch dark. You're using every skill and every tool in your toolbox to go, okay, I see a silhouette. I know it's them. I know I want to get it. I know what it's going to do because she's got a white dress and the building is white. And not only that, but if it underexposes, then the detail in his suit goes away too because he's wearing a black tuxedo. So you need to get something in there. You have, of course, this is film, so it's not like shooting today. You have leeway in a dark room, but not like a raw image.
Right.
Did you know, I mean, was there any sense to you ahead of time that there would be this moment? Or was it just whatever the heck they're doing, I'm going to get it. I don't know what it's going to be. And when the flash went off, you went, oh my gosh, she's kissing her hand.
Yeah. Actually, because it's a Hasselblad and it's a reflex, and because my eye is often at the camera in the viewfinder, you actually don't see when the flash goes off because the mirror has moved up, so you actually don't see the image when the flash goes off. Right, it's blocking the viewfinder at that exact second, so you really don't even see it then. So this was a peculiar one. Let me say, I had done, obviously, hundreds of weddings. I had done John's sister's wedding, Caroline Kennedy, 10 years before. I had done many other Kennedy weddings at that point. But my point is, the experience is, that's a magical moment. They're just married. They're getting out of that chapel. There's the feeling of we've done it. There's so many emotions happening for every couple, not just John and Carolyn, at that moment as you're coming through the threshold, through the doors, crossing into your life together down those steps. I knew when it would be there. I sensed that it would be. But how do you document it is another. I would also add, remember, it's film, so I'm limited to 24 shots on a 220 roll. That was probably, shot number 2 or 3 because I reloaded knowing that was going to be a hot moment. But then by the time they come out of the church, I'm still their photographer, even though that shot has been done. I need other moments. Now they're away from the white and they're all in the sea of blackness of the dark, which means that the 125 setting is no longer correct because now the flash is seeing black and not white. So I now spin the dial from 125 all the way up to 400 or 500. Why am I doing that? Because the flash is going to see reflectively the black, and I don't want to overexpose their face
Right.
where the negative becomes overly dense. So it's really dealing with extremes. You could say, well, at those times, maybe it would have been better to just use a fixed output flash, and it may have been. But again, this was happening in real time, and my comfort was in reflective metering because I'm constantly going close and then far and moving. So I want my flash to work with me to allow me the fluidity of being near or far the subject, whether they're having a white background or a black. So I'm having to work my hand and babysit the ISO dial to make sure that my exposures are perfect. 60 millimeter lens, magnificent. I was down to f8.5. That's way down there. You're going to have a lot that's in focus. It was tack sharp. And I should mention that the exposure ended up being on the money. They put it on the little computer at the lab, and it's right where it should be in terms of the density. So,
which is the 20 years of experience. And what you've just described, I got to tell you, I need to get you into a photo pit at a concert because what you just described is what I go through every single concert where lead singer's got a spotlight on him, but it's all black background, or lead singer's got a spotlight on him, but now suddenly they turn on landing lights behind him.
Very similar.
It's the same thing. Similar. And you what I tell young concert photographers or people starting out in concert photography, and I've taken wedding photographers. I've got a good friend who's a really good wedding photographer, amazing, talent. But I've taken him to a show with me before, and he left frustrated. Now, the truth is he got amazing shots. But for him, it was very difficult because it was so dynamic in what was happening. And you because of the nighttime, the old church being on an island in the middle of nowhere. So with it being like that scenario, I'm curious about the composition because I love what you got in the church, right? You got that sign. And I'm going to say, while she's the star, the sign's the story. Telling me it's from the 1800s, telling me, yes, it is a church, not just a barn, right? The sign really tells me the story, the weathered paint, all of that type stuff. So this image, I should have mentioned this when I described it for people on audio feed. This image is a square crop. And I'm curious, what made you go with the square crop and what made you do the Dutch angle?
I use the Dutch angle a lot because I like a little bit of a tilt. I just think movement is believable. But this one might be just a tad more exaggerated because, quite honestly, I'm walking backwards when I'm taking the shot. And there's a dog. There was actually a wild boar, pig behind me. So I'm dealing with animals. I'm dealing with an area that I can't see. It's uneven ground. It basically is. I'm actually kind of fumbling around as I take it. That being said, I always enjoy a slight tilt to my camera. It's more interesting to me. And you're right that the little sign on the far right does show the name of the initials of the African Baptist Church from the 19th century. That's true. Now, when it was the cover of the USA Today, they ran it 16 inches or whatever, massively on page 1. That didn't show because they cropped it out. It was the cover of Life magazine. That wasn't shown. It was the cover of so many other magazines, Elle magazine in France. Again, they just show the action of the couple. Most magazines, by the way, corrected, as they say, the Dutch angle.
Do they really?
They eliminated. Newsweek did not, and I called them the day it came out, and I spoke to the photo editor, and he came on. He goes, "It's Denis Reggie." He said, "Yeah." He goes, "Mr. Reggie, you're either going to be very angry with me or very happy." I said, "I'm very happy." Of all the national press, they were the only ones that preserved the Dutch angle, and they allowed it to be seen as a square in its entirety the way I intended it and shot it. Everyone else was, like USA Today, had to correct it to fit within those 3 columns going down the front page. So they're straightening it and all of that. And
which is, I mean, it's understandable, but here's what's funny.
Yeah.
I'm personally doing what I shoot which is pretty much exclusively music related stuff. I don't use a lot of Dutch angle. I'm not a fan of it in the type of genre that I shoot.
Right.
And yet, especially with this square crop, it breaks up the geometry, right? So it creates triangles in areas. So in this particular case, it's not just a presentation choice. It literally is being used to take what is effectively a dead center subject and add to that interest to that composition.
Yeah.
Did you
push it to the right side? Yeah.
Yeah, and change the weighting, right?
Yes.
Plus, get the sign in there, which I'm sorry, to me is just huge. That sign being in there is huge. Whoever cropped that out for a magazine should be talked to.
Steve, I moved away from them more so than I probably do for other couples, and that was a happy benefit that I was aware of because I had seen the sign. But I am actually a foot or two, maybe three, probably 2.5 feet farther away from them than I normally would be of a couple, a newly married couple in a similar situation. What's the reason? Because to raise the propensity of having a tack sharp image that you're guesstimating focus on, you want to increase the distance away from them. The closer I am, the more critical the focus is, but I'm in a 100% dark environment. So the reason I'm moving away is what? Because my 20 years is telling me to maximize the potential for a 100% in focus photograph, the photographer must move away from them to put them closer to the infinity on his lens.
Right.
Because otherwise, the closer I get, the more critical it is, the more difficult it is to guesstimate how to make them in focus.
See, photographers need to think like that more today. We have zoom lenses, and a lot of people still shoot primes. But even with a zoom lens, understanding that 5.6 is not 5.6. 5.6 at the number 5.6 with all other exposure variables the same is a variable depth of field based on a number of factors. So it's not just know your camera and know the settings. It's you got to really understand what's happening with light. Did you do anything in the dark room did you dodge and burn this, or did somebody else?
It's pretty much a straight shot, but it's printed by printers. It was done at CPQ labs in Cleveland, Tennessee. I flew from the wedding. I flew into Tennessee to process on the Sunday. A wonderful crew came in. I couldn't tell them who the client was. All I said was, it's a VIP. I just need the lab to be open on a Sunday. So they brought in 4 people that basically we worked together. And then I left with a 12 by 12 or thereabouts, 11 by 11 photograph, nice size, beautifully done, which I walked into the Associated Press as planned with John and Carolyn to release it at 10 a.m. on Monday morning once they were safely at their honeymoon destination. I had no idea that it was going to be the insanity of, oh my God. It was, our phones just lit up at my office within 10 minutes. And of course, they all wanted story. And of course, I give no interviews whatsoever. More photos, absolutely not. We just agreed to release the one. Later, we did release a second one, the one during the ceremony, done on a Canon camera, by the way, my 35 millimeter shot of them exchanging vows, really pretty, with the orange, the warm light of the candle and the flashlight.
Did they like this shot?
Oh, they loved it. Yeah, he did. They absolutely, they were very happy about it. And of course that made me very happy as well. What a wedding photographer wants to do above all is to make his clients thrilled with the delivery. And this is one, and this is, I should mention, the days before email, where I couldn't just email them and say, here's the shot I'm about to release. Are you good with it? They said to me, we trust you, and that's why you're here. And then Carolyn said, but I do want my full dress to show top to bottom because my dear friend did it and it has to show the dress. I said, got it. I said, I'll pick a great shot of the two of you that shows the dress. Another reason I knew this was going to be a critical shot, because how many times can you get the couple in a journalistic, emotion-filled moment that shows the full dress, cutting of the cake, they're going to be behind a table or, that's half length. She asked me for the full length. That's why I went specifically for that moment. And when I took it, I had a pretty good feeling that it was going to be a magic moment.
Seriously, man. I don't need to tell you. You kind of already know. But still, I do need to tell you. It is just such a brilliant shot. I'm curious because I mentioned I have a friend, a very good friend of mine, who is one of the best wedding photographers I know. And I've met other wedding photographers, and I've seen people say, I want to do an experiment. Well-known photographers that don't shoot weddings. There's one in my head right now who actually put on social media, I'm going to shoot 5 weddings. If I choose you, the condition is that you have to let me do it photojournalistic style. So I'm kind of curious because there are photographers that shoot weddings in your traditional standard way that may want to segue to more, maybe not a whole journalistic wedding, but segue to just including some of that. What's your one big tip for people who want to try and do something as an experiment to try and get the idea of photojournalistic weddings?
Volunteer to be an unspoken second or third shooter at a buddy's wedding who has the mainstay. A hired photographer's there, let him or her deliver what they're supposed to. But if you want to learn photojournalism, go there as the volunteer second photographer or even third photographer and allow yourself to do things without speaking. Wedding photojournalism is a quiet pursuit. Quiet is very important because the magic is you don't want the awareness of the camera. The greatest secret I can give you is phenomenal moments happen when people aren't tied into the fact that they're being photographed. Awareness is the greatest enemy of incredible wedding photographs. This shot that we're looking at today, the JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette, it's magic, but much of the magic is because they aren't thinking about me. I'm the historian. I'm the historian with a big Hasselblad capturing the moment, but they're having this wonderful moment because I'm not ordering them, suggesting, prompting, why don't you try this? Look at me, stand here, kiss her hand, bend her over your arm and give her a smoochy kiss. All of those things that could somewhat sound hokey anyway. Why not find and discover actual moments that happen and come away with images that are authentic? Those are, in fact, timeless moments because all the other ones are trendy that get laughed at later, like blue ruffled tuxedo shirts from the 70s. We laugh at that because it's trendy,
right?
Like brides and grooms on railroad tracks or walking the streets of your city in traffic. That's just a trend. And I'm thinking, yeah, but that doesn't say anything about them. I mean, what does that say about the couple? It says nothing. It just says the photographer asked them to do this.
Well,
and
that's actually a really good point. You could not, I would wager, if a wedding photographer went up to a couple like this and told them, stand here, grab her hand.
I'd be fired.
Put your right hand here, on your hip, hold your flower.
Yeah.
You would never get the authenticity of this, particularly, again, I'm going back to her face, right? She wouldn't be surprised. And she could fake the surprise. She could fake a smile. But I'm sorry, you can just
It'll always
tell.
look fake. Steve, it'll always look fake. I believe we can innately look at a photograph and know, as you study it, as a photographer or as a viewer of art, you will know whether there is knowledge of the process and the camera and the photographer or not. And there's an incredible difference in photographs where the subject is aware versus those when they're unaware. And much of what you're describing so kindly about my photograph that we're discussing today is just that. It is Carolyn being so unaware of being documented. It's all focused on him. He's all focused on her. And if it was faked, we would know it, and the moment would not be there, and the photo would not be as special. It is authenticity, reality, and non-awareness of the camera that makes for great imagery.
And actually, I just went away from the shot. I got to pull that shot up again because there's something else I want to point out. The other thing you would lose if you staged this, for lack of a better phrase, is the fact that there's one guy that's halfway looking out of the doorway, but he knows you're taking the picture, so he's kind of pulling back, hiding. There's another guy that's looking back into the church that doesn't realize you're taking a picture. If you were staging this, you would.
They wouldn't be
can
there.
You move for me? Then you lose the fact that it's an authentic moment. I just literally brilliant. I'm curious. Somebody that has the years of experience of photography that you have, and the Canon Explorer Light, etc. you're a wedding photographer, but you're a journalist at heart, and you've got such a study of the art. If you could tell people to follow one photographer online, aside from yourself, who would you say that people really need to see their work?
I'd love to see more of Joe Busink's work because he really is a soulful individual. He's a wedding photographer based in Los Angeles. He's just a very special person. I think his images are truly amazing. I look historically, of course, at the Cartier-Bressons, and of course I look at imagery done in those 40s, and Alfred Eisenstadt, the great Eisy, all these photographers from years past. I spend a lot of time on Instagram looking around, but honestly, my fascination is really, I'd say, reserved for those in another time, in a Life magazine mission, perhaps, capturing people on the streets in real life. To me, it's all about the historical connection with documenting authentic moments. So we're in a very rarefied sort of a little circle of photographers that really think and act this way. Many people say that they're that way. When you look at their portfolios, they're not talking the same thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about a journalistic documentation of a wedding. I think Joe Busink, for a lot of his work, is there. By the way, I also love other types of photography as well. Bambi Cantrell, I think, is tremendous with her
posing,
her very
genius.
Arty.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she's just phenomenal and so feminine with her posing and her images, and with children and women especially. She's a genius, and I think you have folks like that are in that space. I follow dozens and dozens of photographers, but those are the ones that come off the top of my mind as you asked me that question.
Again, to say thank you does not cover it. I want to remind everybody that obviously the image we talked about today and a small gallery of Denis's work is on the blog post, as well as links to all of his stuff. Throughout the show, lower thirds, if you watch the video version, have been popping up with all of his URLs for all of his social media. But it's DenisReggie.com. It's Denis with one N. DenisReggie.com. And there's links on your website to all of your social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of that type of stuff. Denis, thank you so much, man.
This was so much fun.
Skip,
thank you.
If Skip Cohen's watching, I owe you
We
one.
both need to thank him.
Yeah.
Great guy.
I owe him an adult beverage now.
Good idea.
So, Denis, thanks again very, very much. Love your work, and people go follow him.
What an enjoyable way to spend an hour. Thank you so much for this wonderful chance to talk photography. I always love doing that. I'm a big admirer of your program, and I'm honored to be a guest for this episode. Thank you so much, Steve.
I really, really appreciate it. Before I go, a couple of quick reminders for you. Flern, if you want to sign up for a subscription at Flern, you can get a 20% discount with the Behind the Shot code. It's Behind the Shot 20, the number 20, not the word 20, and it's no spaces in that. So head on over to Flern.com, PHLEARN. And again, 20% discount with that. Again, Flickr. Go over to the Flickr group. It's called Behind the Shot on Flickr. Find that group. Join the group. Submit your images with BTS Critique as the tag. And Don Komarechka and I are going to pull a selection of images. We won't get to all of them, but we're going to try and go through pretty quick, more of almost like an image comp style where we'd give small amounts of information that we think are going to be the top things that will perhaps get you to the next level. And we'll be doing that coming up probably mid-November. So head on over there now. This is going to run late October. So you'll have at least a couple of weeks to go and get those submitted. Again, as always, thanks to my guest, Denis Reggie. Is just amazing. DenisReggie.com. It's DenisReggie.com. Head over to his website, check him out. And to everybody else, I really appreciate your watching. You can subscribe at BehindTheShot.tv. You can see the show notes for this episode at BehindTheShot.tv. And feel free to hit me up on social media. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next show.